Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Abel. I'm with the IMS Global Learning Consortium, and welcome to our Learning Impact on Demand series. We're here to discuss the effective support of all forms of digital teaching and learning and what we're experiencing in light of the accelerated movement to remote, online, virtual, distance education, all of the above in the age of COVID-19 and perhaps beyond. Today, we have a very, very distinguished panel of K-12 leaders from among the IMS members who are definitely the smartest people on the planet when it comes to ed tech. I'd like to introduce each one of our panelists so you can get to know who they are. First, we have, and each one say hello after I introduce, just to let the audience know who you are. Our first panelist is Maurice Draggon, who's the Senior Director of Digital Learning at Orange County Public Schools here in Florida. Hi, Maurice.
Hi, Rob. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Our second panelist will be Jeanne Imbriale, who's the Director for the Office of Enterprise Applications at the Baltimore County Public Schools. Hi, Jeanne.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Third panelist, Tricia Kennedy, Executive Director of Instructional Development and Support at Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia. Hi, Tricia.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
And finally, Dr. Kevin Tashlein, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Gwinnett County also at Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Rob. Good to be here.
Yeah, so welcome to all the panelists. And for our audience, what we're here to discuss today, as all of you are truly experts in the field of academic, instructional technology, and IT, and all the above, is really just your insights that you've gained so far in terms of this unprecedented scale up of this very wide range of practices that we're seeing for digital supportive teaching and learning across K-12 education. We know that COVID-19 is unpredictable, so the impact of it is likely to be with us for a while. And so from your vantage point, we'd like to learn about what you're thinking might happen in the near-term future and the long-term future as well. So let's start with the near term, what we've learned so far, and kind of the, most kind of maybe highest priority things that are happening in terms of the best practices and so forth, and just really kind of what the emphasis has been. And for that, we're going to start here in Orange County with Maurice.
Thanks so much, Rob. I think when I really focus in on what are the things we have learned as a district and even as a department, it really is that there are three core things. The first one is focusing on your foundational capabilities. And what I mean by that is, what are the things that you were doing well before COVID-19 ever started? And it is really using those as guiding posts for you to then know what are the things that you know you will excel at, and that you can make sure that you're scaling up to meet the challenges and needs that you face. So if you are a team that delivers content to teachers like my team does, or you run the platforms that deliver that content, then you know that you already have some really strong foundational capabilities in place. And then the thought process has to be about how do you improve that. You're going to get hit by a lot of different requests to really just expand right away. And I know all school districts probably have. One of my former bosses used to say, folks will come to you and they'll say free, free, free. But sometimes that free is not really free like you get a free hamburger or hot dog, but it's free like in a puppy, where you still have to do all these things to take care of it after you have it. And so we have really tried to stick with our foundational capabilities, know the things that we know that we do well, and then just really to scale that up to meet the need. The second thing I will mention very quickly is revisiting your assumptions that you've made. There may be some things that you are doing that you've always done that were based upon the idea that you are actually in school. And so there are things, for example, like rostering for summer school. It's something that we've never done because we just did not have to. Summer school, sometimes they had the teachers just bring in their own things, but now summer school will be virtual for us. So we have to think about now, and we have to revisit that assumption. And then I think the final thing that I will mention is parental support. We now have parents that are going and they have to look not only at the grade that a student has received, but actually in the actual systems and programs that the kids are using themselves. And so we really had to build up a whole new arm of not only supporting parents once they are inside of the software and systems that we use, but also to make sure that we are communicating to them where they are. If your parents are on Facebook and you're putting everything in the world on Twitter, you have a mismatch there. You need to go to Facebook also to make sure that they're actually getting the information that you're sharing.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Maurice. Jeanne, would you like to weigh in on what you've learned so far at Baltimore County?
Absolutely. So some of the most important learnings that we've had, or in some cases, affirmations. The first one is really an affirmation around our decision to take a centralized approach to our information technology and our instructional technologies. And that has allowed us to have the robust infrastructure to be able to support our 115,000 students. At the center of our digital ecosystem, our digital ecosystem rests on that robust IT infrastructure, and that robust ecosystem has allowed us one single space for all of our students, our parents, and our staff members to come to get their resources to be able to implement and to be successful in remote teaching and working. At the center of our digital ecosystem is our learning management system. A few years ago, we centralized that, so all 174 schools use the same learning management system in grades pre-K through 12. This also allows and helps us with that equity question as well, because we can ensure that every student, no matter what school that they attend, has access to those same digital resources or that curriculum that is housed within our learning management system. And we also centralized and created great consistency around all of our curriculum and our lessons. Again, there's a consistent format at pre-K and kindergarten, and that same format is carried through 12th grade as well. So again, it makes it very easy as our students were transitioning to a fully remote environment. It also makes it really easy for our parents to be able to support. And that goes along with another learning or an affirmation that we must support our parents just like we need to support our teachers and our students. So we implemented and really bolstered our support, our tech support for our parents and our students, being able to provide them knowledge-based resources, being able to provide them with call-in support, online support, lots of different ways at lots of different times based on when they need it. So those are just a few of the things that helped us be successful in this transition to remote working and learning.
Great. Thanks, Jeanne. Tricia, how about Gwinnett?
Yeah, I can echo a lot of the things that Maurice and Jeanne shared as well. And particularly, first of all, just bouncing off of Maurice's point of that foundation, sticking with your foundation. What we found to be most successful in Gwinnett is that we hold tight to our instructional priorities and our instructional philosophies, and tried hard not to change those as we move to fully online. I think there's wisdom in that. We've tried to adapt those instructional practices to an online environment. So we've spent a lot of energy during this time helping our teachers understand just what it looks like to change from a face-to-face lesson around really strong instruction and changing that to a fully online lesson. I've watched a lot of colleagues in a lot of areas in the panic mode, purchasing or using the freebies, kind of like what Maurice talked about, because, you know, just trying to get something out there. And I understand that, and that's okay, but only, I'd say, if it still fits into your existing instructional philosophy and framework, and making sure that whatever you are using in the moment is still a part of that, you know, strong instructional practices. And then the other thing I would say that I think is serving us well in Gwinnett, I feel like that we've been able to leverage some what I would call sprint strategies, as well as long-term kind of marathon strategies. For instance, in 2018 and 2019, we actually had fully online days because we had some weather-related school closures. And we had been working on long-term strategies before those days, which in essence became practice days. We didn't know that at the time. And prior to that, those school closures fully online, we had asked teachers to assign homework online for their students all on one day, or to have some time during the teacher work day where they had students still accessing assignments from home. That allowed them to use a low risk scenario basically to gather some information, like did students have access? And then we were able also to check out our infrastructure. Along the way, we provided guidance to our teachers about what a digital lesson should really look like. Like Jeanne mentioned, we had templates for lessons and tips around best practices, length of lessons, and how to adjust for kids who are sharing a device, multiple students sharing a device. So those kind of strategies, I think, served us well moving into this, what we're calling extended time of digital learning days, and helping us then to be able to build teachers' confidence in that lesson development. So I would just encourage everyone to be thinking, yes, you've got to do something probably in the moment, and we had to as well change some things during the spring, but the long-term strategies also served us really well.
Thanks, Tricia. Kevin, would you like to add some thoughts from where you sit at Gwinnett County?
I would. Trish really did a nice job, and so did Maurice and Jeanne, covering some of the things I'd share with. I think many of us started this unprecedented scale up thinking it might last a week or two maybe, and then we'd get back to normal. And I think as that settled in over time, some of the work that Tricia talked about, she's done really nice work with the whole team in the organization to make sure we can do this. We have built those pieces in. I think that's an important remembering learning. But I think now, knowing that we can do this for an extended period of time and on demand, we really need to be thinking about effective ways to engage and then differentiate for our students and families, so to keep it fresh. And not really create a sense of intentionally or unintentionally a series of prolonged PowerPoints, perhaps with a voiceover. I think very, very important. And then any of this remote and sustained scale up, it's not going to be sustained unless we're able to incorporate appropriate technologies. I heard appropriate concern about just grabbing what's available, and sometimes you have to do that in a sprint, but thinking long term, what might really leverage the instructional models of a particular school system, both face-to-face, blended, and in digital remote learning. I think it's very important. Additionally, it's interesting to see both as a parent of students in the system, with a wife who's an educator in the system, how this has really pried open our district's instructional program and put it out there right in front of parents in a way that they perhaps haven't had direct access to, or have had to have direct access to before, in order to try to support their students' learning in the home. It's been very huge, and at the same time, while we're trying to figure that out, it's accelerated the need for our staff, and particularly teachers at varying proficiency levels, to really accelerate what they're able to do to meet the students' needs, and then rapidly improve within it, in a time frame that may have taken a year or two perhaps for some staff, but really has to have happened within this short window, so our students don't lose ground. I think those are the key learnings that have occurred from my perspective.
Okay, well, those are awesome. What I'm hearing so far is foundations, understanding your foundations, providing consistency, both from a technological point of view and an instructional point of view, and really support for parents as kind of a really important new point here, and really practice really helps if you can manage to do that. So now we'd like to talk about the, what might happen in the fall in terms of back to school and what you're thinking about, and what comes next for you, and what are those sorts of things that might be possible to put in place in time for the fall. And then we'd like to start with Tricia on this one.
Sure, thanks, Rob. So in Gwinnett, we're thinking about 2 or 3 things that we know we need to maybe do differently getting ready for the fall. One of them is that we know that students who needed additional support, needed different needs addressed, that we struggled more with that in the online environment than we do in the face-to-face. So we've got to help teachers know how to, first of all, even identify online the students that are struggling online, and then also how to provide those interventions. And we also need to continue to improve how we're addressing accommodations and modifications for our special needs students, for our English learners. We're looking at both online strategies and some additional resources to help us going forward. And we're also really looking at our formative assessment practices online, because we believe that we need to shore those up in order for instruction then to still be informed by those practices, so we can address those individual student needs. And honestly, we know we're going to have a lot more kids that are behind going into the fall. Fully online is not what we do best. It's great that we have it as an option. We're so thankful, but we know that we're going to have more students that have fallen behind for a variety of reasons than usual. And we're going to have to address that going into the fall and find strategies for it. I would say too that, we're going to continue focus on our professional learning. We're really looking at helping our teachers understand how to move. They've been well trained in blended environments, but not necessarily fully online. So we've done a lot of work in the last several years around how to incorporate technology into your instruction and your instructional model. But there's a nuance now of then what does that look like when you're really fully online. And we're putting a lot of energy into that in the fall. I would say too, just a couple of encouragements for others out there. Jeanne mentioned that centralized place for that centralized point. And, I think of that as a place of entry, a single place of entry for students and parents and teachers. And I would say that's a high priority. Thankfully, we have that, but we're looking at how we can even shore it up even more. And if you don't have that, I would say that would need to be a high priority. You might be a provider that helps you with an integrated landing page. There's several that are part of IMS and have IMS certifications in that area. I'd encourage that. It might be a free tool like Google or Microsoft Teams, but I'd say making that choice and going with it, at least school-wide, if not district-wide, is really going to help students and parents in the fall. And the other thing I feel like maybe because we were running so fast that we didn't do as well this spring, that we need to do better for the fall, is reaching out and staying connected with other schools, other districts to share the load. In the state of Georgia, our State Department has open digital content that's available to all districts. I'm not sure everybody's even aware of that. Some of our providers are doing some of the same thing, connecting us together. And I think that sharing resources and helping one another, we need to prioritize that going into the fall.
All right. Thanks, Tricia. Maurice, how about at Orange County? What's going to happen for the fall, do you think?
So when I think about the fall, a lot of the things that Tricia just shared are definitely, huge things that we also had to think about. I think if I were going to add anything on, one of the things I would add on that we're really focusing on, honestly, from right now, is what access will look like for not only students and teachers, but also for staff members like coaches or assistant principals or folks that are not exactly inside the classroom. But now with distance learning, access for them needs to look very different. And so we are working right now to make updates, for example, to the backend one roster file that we use to make sure that we are getting more folks in. We are making updates to as much as we can to try to facilitate that access piece of it, because we don't know what the fall will look like. We don't know if we will be back completely or just half the time, or if we'll come back and then have to go back out. And so we want to make sure that access is not one of those things that's on the table that we have to worry about. And I think the second piece that I would really say that we're working hard on for fall is, and this kind of piggybacks off of the piece around your foundational capabilities, is really embracing our role. And what I mean by that is that there's so much unknowns that are out there right now that you start thinking about all the dependencies that will that exist based upon any decision that you may make. So I think if you know, again, what your role is and the core thing that your department does, then I think that really helps, because if you can shore that up, if you know that you run the platforms that folks need to access, if you know that you provide the resources, if you know that you have the platforms that folks need to use for communication, and you make sure that those are really solid, then that becomes now solid points that others can connect into to have whatever they need to have done, whether it's communicating out to students and someone comes to you and says, hey, can we send something to just the fifth graders to let them know that this change is taking place? Having those things in place, I think, is helpful, because this situation is something that makes it really easy for folks to, I think, try to look at the bigger picture of how everything connects, and then for them to get lost inside of it. And those plans are happening all over. But I think we have to not forget the core things that we do and continue to do those core things well.
That's great advice. Kevin, do you want to add anything about what's going to happen in the fall from your perspective?
Maurice did a nice job talking about that. That's an ongoing concern for us. As good as we've moved, whether it be technology to families in need and trying to support access to internet service, we're going to have to think about that. We talk about foundational documents, and all means all students. So we really need to keep working our systems and processes to get the support to students if we were able to have to start not face-to-face. Another thing that's striking me is, as we're wrapping up this year, as we try to hold on to some of the rituals around the closing of school, whether that be, I've seen a virtual honors night, we're about to see virtual graduations, even some proms, virtual sort of things. How we open the school year is critical with that relationship that we need to build, that instant impact of a relationship with students and their families and the excitement of being back to school. How we try to capture that in a virtual environment is going to be very, very important. In this current cycle, we had roughly 3/4 of the school year completed. Teachers had a chance to meet with their students, meet with families. This is a brand new way to engage somebody in this environment, and that's a new way to learn, I think. And a lot of the success will be built on all the technology pieces we talk about. Ultimately, though, this is a people enterprise, and how we connect with our people and our families is going to be huge if we have to start remotely.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Jeanne, you get the last word on what's might be different and new in the fall.
Okay, so to build upon what Kevin was talking about, not only building those ever important relationship between the teachers and the students to the students, but really looking at how we establish those connections and those relationships with our parents. And I'm going to come back to what we talked about in the first question about parent communication, parent almost training. We're looking at ways, how do we train our teachers to train our parents, because they are our connection to our parent community, so that they can, because we know that they have a direct impact on engagement. If the parents are engaged, then it's more likely that the students will be engaged, and that's so very important in this remote environment. To build upon engagement, we are exploring different ways right now, and we know that it's critical for us to be able to measure engagement as we move into possibly a longer term of remote learning. So we are working within our organization to come to a common definition around engagement. what are the various different indicators? How do we measure that? We're using various forms of data sources to gather that information, and we're learning how to ask questions and not rely on our assumptions. We've made a lot of assumptions about our students, the way they learn, if they have access, but really making those decisions based on what the data is telling us, that will be ever so important as we move forward.
Boy, that's a very, very wide set of expectations and things to focus on for the fall. Your folks are going to be very, very busy. So now we're going to consider what might be the lasting impact of this further on down the line, if any. And Kevin, we'd like to start this off with you.
I think about if we do this really well with the professional development that we're providing and integrating technology into the classroom, I think we have a real opportunity to see much improved quality of teaching in a variety of environments, face-to-face, hybrid, and remote. And this has really required an accelerated approach to that, just for sheer survival in many ways, of keeping curriculum viable, keeping students engaged. We reach out to students in different ways. I think this has been if we continue to learn some of these lessons from here, I think it's going to be very, very powerful. In Gwinnett, we call them Quality Plus teaching strategies, and I think incorporating those pervasively throughout different learning models. We just didn't have the luxury of time like we might have several years. We just had to do it. And I think this may be a huge lever for new teachers entering the profession that are much more comfortable in this technology environment. So I'm excited about seeing how this looks both a half year and a year down the line. I think we're also going to see what we've learned, that students and parents are going to want to keep aspects of this flexibility that work for them and their families. Every student may not want to come back to school every day of the week in a traditional high school. They may want to have a much more blended model within a traditional school. So other schooling models, I think, may play. And I think parents will continue to appreciate the kind of transparency we've had, the access to student grades, the level of work they're being asked to do every day across the board. And as I shared earlier, since that's been pried open in many ways, I think this notion of collective efficacy among educators that work together, we can really see some gains there on behalf of all our students, not just my individual classroom, but really thinking about how do we move collegially together to support our students regardless of the environment that they're in. That's an optimistic view, but I think educators have risen to that challenge historically and will do it. And I just don't want us to lose some of those key lessons.
Mm-hmm. Jeannie, what do you think about the lasting impact of all this?
We're really in a lot of the same mindset as you, Kevin. We're looking at not only different models of school, but this has really served as a catalyst to how we define school and schooling. And we're also looking at our scheduling options moving forward. And those schedule options are right now being thought of in a remote setting, but how those scheduling options might also translate even if we have a blended model for instruction, or even if we go back to fully online. But we're also going to keep, this is the first time that we've had consistency, all of our various content areas working together. We have a cadence and a rhythm, we have structures, we have formats, that consistency, the collaboration, we would like to capitalize on that. And again, this has really helped all of our folks throughout our entire organization. We in IT always knew the critical role of our digital ecosystem, why it was important. So we want to capitalize on this and use it as an opportunity to further others' understanding about why this work is so important, because it has served as the basis which has allowed us again to be so successful during this time.
Mm-hmm. Tricia, what do you think the lasting impact might be?
Well, I definitely agree that the demand from our stakeholders and our community, our parents, is going to be different. And Jeannie and Kevin both spoke to that. We have a school in the district now already that 2 years ago opened as a high school, with every Friday being a fully online day, 4 days in the building. building and then 1 day a week out of the building. So students could do internships so that teachers had the opportunity for more intensive collaborative planning. And it's a technology-based school, but I think those are the kinds of things that we're going to see a demand for in all of our schools. What we call a traditional school, I think in the next 2 to 5 years will really change the way that looks. And the opportunity for choice and school choice, I think this is going to accelerate that. I'm also really hoping, just like that's a different demand from our community, I'm really hoping that this will, it'll make access for all a priority for the community, not just for school districts. It should be that support. We need the support from communities and government, and hoping that that short term of our technology infrastructure as a society will look very different, and that'll no longer be just left up to schools to close the digital divide.
Wow, these are sounding like some very positive outcomes potentially. Maurice, what do you think about the lasting impact?
So when I think about the lasting impact of what we've all experienced over the last couple of months now, what I really think about is how education in some ways is on a different trajectory than some of the things that we hear happening in other industries. In other industries, we hear about hollowing out of that middle ground, where you have things going really high end or you have things going really low end, and that middle ground where you have, whether it's small business or whatever else, that folks are really concerned about what's going to happen there. And I think what we've had in education for a while is we've had the two poles, where you had face-to-face instruction or you had online instruction, but we did not have that middle ground really fleshed out. And so we're going to have the opposite happening with us. We're going to have a building up of the middle ground and what that looks like. And there are things that are going to be very exciting about that, because I think now what we've seen in all the other places that have middle grounds is that that's where you have a lot of experimentation. That's where you have a lot of new ideas that are being generated as far as flexible seating, blended, folks coming in sometimes and not coming into schools in other times. So I think there's going to be a really big innovative space that's there. I think it's going to be something that as educators, whenever you have a place that is ripe for innovation, it's also, we're not the only ones who notice that. So I do think you're going to see a rise in other folks that are going to come into the space, also into education space, technology companies, things like that. They're going to look and they're going to want to have a seat at the table in talking about innovation. And so I think as we go down into this kind of new pathway, it will be just kind of continuing to have that balance and figuring out how this newer willingness to experiment in some ways, because we have to, because school has to look different. If the virus comes back in any kind of force, but also because folks are looking now and saying that they don't want to go back, as some others have said, to just things being polar opposites. We'll have some interesting days ahead, but I think there is there's potential for really just some innovative practices coming out from this.
Wow, so I'm hearing from all the panelists, this looks like this might help actually accelerate some aspects of the future, but in a very, very thoughtful way, and that's very encouraging. So finally, I wanted to thank all of you for your leadership in our community, which is the IMS Global Learning Consortium, and the work that we're doing. And I wanted to get some final word from each of you on just how you think the IMS work has been impacting this, or how this event will impact the IMS work, or whatever you might want to say about the relationship between this type of, this whole occurrence in the work of IMS. And we're going to let Jeanne kick this one off.
Great, thank you. So the first word that comes to mind, and a word that we used in one of our IMS board meetings the other day, was collaborative. IMS has provided a collaborative space, a collaborative forum for educational and information technology professionals to come together and to share ideas, to problem solve, and even gain support from each other. Because although we've learned a lot and we've grown a lot and a lot of positive experiences have come out of this, it hasn't always been easy. And I found a great support system offered through this network of professionals. The other thing that I'd like to say that IMS has really helped us overcome a lot of our issues with access. You know, we certainly have challenges ahead, but as an educational technology professional and as a parent, as I watch my students, my own children, access resources in science and social studies and math and language arts, it's very easy because we have already used one roster and rostered them into systems, so that it's made the access easier. We have those LTI connections right within the learning management system, so they don't have to go out to all these different spaces to learn. So that's had a profound impact on our work and a lasting impact as we move forward. So thank you.
Oh, that's great. Tricia, what do you think about the relationship with the IMS work?
Yeah, the ease of operation amongst the applications is why we joined IMS in the first place, and it's still extremely important. In fact, I believe that we wouldn't have had that single point of entry that we've had during this period of time, and without it, it was really key to our success in the transition to online. But I would say a secondary benefit, one that's very personal to me, is like Jeanne was saying, the partnerships amongst the members.
Mm-hmm.
I've had multiple conversations with other districts during this whole time with leaders in those districts who are in the consortium. They've really become my inner circle. I'm continually learning from them, and I'm much better in my role and my district, I believe, better serves our students because of the relationships that we have and the ongoing collaboration within IMS Global.
That's great to hear. Maurice, what would you like to say about the relationship with IMS?
So I think that one of the things, and I agree with everything that's been said about how IMS really helps us to make sure that we're efficiently moving data in between the different systems that we have into publishers and different partners, and about that ability to really collaborate. I think one of the most impactful things that IMS provides, however, is, you know, they have that old saying about how technology, when it works, sometimes is indistinguishable from magic. And I think it's that point when a teacher or a student needs to access a resource and they're not entering in a username and password. The teacher is not sitting down and trying to figure out how to basically build a roster file on their own to get access to resource. It's really where we take the technology out of the way through the use of the standards in the background, and we just let teachers teach, and we let kids access the resources they need to learn. And I think that's the most important part of the work, is how it enables so much more time for teachers and students to do really the core of education.
That's great to hear. Kevin, we'll give you the last word on the impact of the IMS work.
Well, Maurice took a lot of my last word, because it really does let relative talent shine. And as a building administrator, I just remember being frustrated when things didn't talk to each other. Why didn't they talk to each other? This notion of expertise in really meeting student need, you know, both young students and adult adult learners, is huge. And for something that perhaps I would have taken for granted several years ago, not being as intimately involved with IMS's work, this notion of interoperability and standards really create a playing field where we can have much more robust learning occur and sustained learning for students. So I think that's to be the impact of the work as I've experienced it thus far.
Well, it's great to hear all that, and we've run out of time. So thank you, Maurice, Jeanne, Tricia, Kevin, for those incredible insights. And I wanted to thank everyone who's tuned in and has viewed this. We look forward to seeing you back here for more of our series on highly effective digital teaching and learning. This is Rob Abel saying bye for now, and let's keep the learning going.